Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin, where we unpack the strategies and solutions that make localization fast, scalable, and efficient. I'm your host, Stefan Huyghe. Good morning. We're here with Mathias Bolt Lesniak from TYPO3, the project ambassador for TYPO3, and we're about to talk some open source with Mathias. It's really early here in Texas, Mathias. Thank you for joining us a little bit later in the morning in Norway. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So yes, I have been working with TYPO3 since 2003. So yeah, a 27-year-old project we are now.
Good to hear. Let's dive right in and talk a little bit of open source and global enterprise. How do you describe TYPO3's position in the global CMS ecosystem compared to commercial platforms like, say, Adobe Experience Manager or Sitecore?
So that's a really interesting question, and since this is a podcast and not a political question, I'm gonna take my time and do the long answer to that one, because it's very common that we compare individual CMSs to the commercial space, and in some way that's kind of unfair, because it's very easy for these large commercial systems with large marketing budgets to always say that, well, we can always build the feature for you, and well, then what I think we should say from the CMS side, open source CMS side, is really, well, choose open source for the benefits of open source first, and then go and choose your CMS. So once you've done that, once you've understood that, for example, open source is your direct way to digital sovereignty, then TYPO3 is one of the largest content management systems in the open source category today, and fully featured with a big focus on exactly multilingual and multi-site features.
Yeah, and what makes open source a viable choice for enterprises with complex multilingual requirements in particular?
So firstly, apart from the feature set that you already get with a platform like TYPO3, it also gives you the full freedom to work with the solution. You don't just adapt the features that you have there, but you can become part of a contribution community that helps build not the system that you necessarily adopted on day one, but actually a system that can adapt to your needs along the way. And the changes that you invest in are changes that you then reap the benefits from.
Yeah. Are there any specific industries where you're seeing TYPO3 thrive when it comes to multilingual content?
So TYPO3 is really big in the government space, in the higher education space, and we also see in a lot of export industries. So these are really areas where multilingual comes maybe as an obvious thing, but I think especially when it comes to government, we very often think of many governments as being single language, but a lot of what governments need to communicate is actually multilingual, both for new people coming to the country, but also for minorities. So it's very important that governments work with multilingual CMSs so that they can support all of the people that live and work in the country.
Yeah. In your experience, what are the most overlooked localization needs when deploying CMS system across those markets?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because uh, one of the things that I have seen working with CMSs uh, in this space is that, firstly, we very often forget that you need to adopt to different cultures as well as different languages. And coming from Norway, a small language, one of the things that we see often here is that we only have translations of text strings from another country, but then the cultural side of it is not something that's actually seen or listened to, and that's really important to look at in this space. Another thing that I find is really important here is many businesses look at multilingual and localization as something that's expensive. It's sort of a must-have, but it's something that you want to spend as little money on as possible. And given that, it's quite surprising, I find, that there is so few CMSs that actually support working with good comparison of the original text. So TYPO3 has that feature where, you can translate one text once, but then if they make a small change to the original text, you can actually go in and see what that one change is and just focus on that instead of doing all these large-scale translations that you often see each time something changes.
Crowdin is known for its simplification of complex projects, so to speak. Can you share an example of a multilingual TYPO3 project that involved high levels of complexity and Crowdin maybe gave you some relief?
Yeah, so the go-to example here, I mean, TYPO3 has these features of multilingual and multi-site, and they often work together. But the go-to example is the University of Vienna, the oldest university in the world. Of course, they've been using TYPO3 since the beginning. Since the beginning of the web anyway. And they have a very, very large TYPO3 instance where they run all of their, what is it now, 1,200 websites. Altogether, there's maybe 500,000 to 1 million content items on those sites, and they work with 32 different languages. So that's both size and complexity all at once. And then TYPO3 works well both with the content localization and with localizing the strings in the code, of course, where Crowdin is the Crowdin integration is a core feature of TYPO3 and a core way of how we work with making TYPO3 available in new languages.
I was going to ask you, what's your approach? How does TYPO3 handle translation management and the integration with external tools, since you touched upon it already?
Yeah, so TYPO3 since many years actually have been using Crowdin as the place where we place our localized text strings for the TYPO3 core, but also for all of the extensions or plugins or whatever you want to call it, the add-on code, the add-on modules for TYPO3. And today, the entire TYPO3 core and all of the public extensions that want to are hosted for free by Crowdin on Crowdin, and we're very thankful for that. And that's really just the top level of our localization workflow. So when you're working in TYPO3 and you're going to set up a new language, you can configure that language, and then TYPO3 will download the localized strings from TYPO3's localization servers. So these servers cache a lot of the localized strings from Crowdin, make them available in the format that both Crowdin and TYPO3 likes, which is XLIFF, and then that's downloaded to the TYPO3 instance and made available there. But it's actually also possible, and I know that a number of large enterprises use that as well, with setting up private accounts on Crowdin and having their own TYPO3 translation servers that integrates both the public and the private translation strings. So really powerful.
Yeah. Who's your typical stakeholder within the organization? Who's that persona that you deal with? Is it a localization manager, or is it somebody in marketing or a CTO that drives the CMS decisions in these global companies?
Yeah, often we talk about both marketing and IT as the decision makers in this process. But since we're talking about uh, localization and specifically of the user interface where we use Crowdin. I think it's also important to point out that, this is actually our product is for the user, for the editor. And what we often see is that, yes, you can listen as much as you want to the needs of the marketers or the needs of IT, but very often in the procurement process, the editors are the ones that are most impacted, but also least consulted. So we need to work more with the editors in the process, and I think that's really important when it comes to multilingual as well, because they are the people who need to work with the translation workflows. They're the ones who need to uh, be involved in the actual process of switching between different languages and maintaining the content.
Yeah. What's your advice for anyone who's evaluating open source CMS for their multilingual content operations?
So my main advice there is to, if you're an enterprise, go for a content management system that has core support for multilingual features. Because one of the things you don't want to do in a large, complex CMS installation is to have to deal with different implementations of multilingual. So TYPO3 has that as a core feature. It's maintained by our core team, that everything that you do in TYPO3 should be easily integratable with the core features. And that means that you have one way to do it. Everything is supported the same way. And it means that building on top of that as well, when you need custom code, for example, is much easier.
Yeah. You've touched upon the XLIFF format already a little bit. What's your view on XML-based formats in general, or similar technologies in managing multilingual content?
So I think XML is a great format, and XLIFF is the chosen format of TYPO3 for localization. But it's really also a format that keeps these localizations away from code, for example. We could have put all of the localization strings in PHP. That would have led to a lot of challenges, I think, in how we deal with the translation workflows. Also, if you need to export a translation and send it to an external company, for example, for translation, XLIFF is a standard format, firstly, but it's also got nothing to do with PHP code. So you can send it to anyone who can read that format, and they can participate in the translation process. So that it's another level of decoupling on the translation side, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, and translators are often familiar with XLIFF as well, so that helps. How can structured content help improve multilingual SEO across markets, you think?
So it's structured content is something we seldom, too seldom maybe, talk about in relation to multilingual, but I think it's something that becomes even more important when you have multilingual content, because when you structure the content well and you manage to also decouple the design and the content, you can work much more with separation of concerns. So one text string can be translated independently of other text strings. You can pick out exactly what has changed and send it to whoever needs to translate it. So maintenance becomes a lot easier, and like I said a little while ago, it makes it easier to maintain a large complex content base.
Yeah. Matthias, we're geeking out nicely here this morning because we've managed to talk about 15 minutes already without mentioning the word AI, but here it comes. We weren't going to do the whole podcast without mentioning AI. So do you see opportunities for AI or automation in TYPO3's localization workflows? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I mean, AI came in like a bomb and changed everything for pretty much everyone. But I think for content management, it really makes it possible to act much faster, have much higher quality on automated translations. We've had, automated translations for years, but they've had a lower standard. And now what you do is not to go in and correct mistakes. You make sure that the translation is how you want it, and then you can publish it. And there's a number of TYPO3 agencies that have done integrations for systems like DeepL, for example, where you go to a page, you say, I want to have this English page in German, you click a button, and everything is translated automatically for you. And these kind of processes just speeds things up. At the same time, I think it's easy to forget that, machine learning isn't perfect, and we still need to invest money in quality assurance, because when it comes to, for example, cultural differences or just sounding the right way, we still need humans in there to manage the content.
Yeah. Where do localization teams typically get left out in the CMS development, in your experience, and how can it be avoided?
So in many cases, I think that we give too little focus to localization into smaller languages. Coming from a small language myself, I know how much work it is, and that is actually something that is a threat to small cultures or cultural diversity. And it's a responsibility that we need to take more seriously as software developers, that we allow smaller languages to exist in software. And then it's also an interesting thing that comes when you work as a developer with code. You often code a system in or the localization translation features in a software from your own perspective, as your mother tongue. For example, if it's English, you're going to use English grammar as the basis for your code. But what you need to build in is also support for other grammars. For example, what is it? French has a different grammar for the number 0, for example, than what English has. And that's one of these things that comes in, and suddenly you'd have a system that is totally fine in English, but that sounds strange in French. And focusing on that, managing to have a software that can adapt to those kind of needs as well, is really important for making the users feel more comfortable using the system. It's easier to adapt to it, and it's, I think, a reason why you should look more carefully at the localization features, both for text strings in the code, but also for localization in content as well.
Yeah, very well. How does the TYPO3 community contribute to localization efforts in any way?
So there's always been community involvement in the localization in TYPO3. It's totally based on community members contributing translations. But recently, in the last few years, the localization team has been revived in the TYPO3 community by Peter Kraume, who's the new lead of the localization team, and he's done a great job and gotten a lot of people to really understand the importance of localization, and maybe I can say also made it more fun to be a translator. And what we've seen is, a lot more translations happening. I looked at the statistics before I joined you here, and just in July, we had 7,700, I think, text strings or words translated by the community within Crowdin. And also some individuals really double down and do work for weeks and months on reaching the magical 100% mark for their language. And if I can make two examples, I mean, we have one guy called Abdul Hamid, who has done a great job on the Arabic translation of TYPO3. TYPO3 is now 100% translated into Arabic. But that process of translating Arabic also made us discover the needs for adapting to right to left languages, because Arabic is not like European script from left to right. It goes from right to left. And that led to the core team implementing a fully right to left interface in TYPO3. So if you switch to Arabic in TYPO3, it's not just the strings that change, but the whole user interface changes from right to left. And now recently as well, we saw Czech, for example, coming up as translated 100% for TYPO3. And these big commitments by individual contributors are really important for making TYPO3 available in these languages, also where English is maybe not the language most people would like to use when they use a piece of software.
Yeah, I think that's terrific that you called out the guy by name. So often the translators, when they're individuals, get forgotten, and I think that's really good that you recognize somebody in person. Let's talk about your contribution process just a second. Can you describe how TYPO3's translation infrastructure works?
Yes, so I mentioned it a bit earlier as well, but it's really based upon Crowdin being the core of the translation process. So for the different languages, the localization team has people responsible for reviewing all of the translations that come in. And for smaller languages, it's maybe one or two people who work on it. For larger languages, it's a larger group of people. Sometimes we also see people jump in from outside of our community and just contribute translations, which is really great. And then these translations are managed in Crowdin and then brought into our translation server and made available to TYPO3, like I said. And also this thing that it is possible to bring in third-party extensions into the system makes it possible for more than just the code in the core to be localized, but really all of the contributions that we have in code and additional features for TYPO3 can be translated just as easily.
Could the enterprise localization teams in the overall business world learn something from open source localization communities, you think?
Yeah, I think very often when you talk about commercial systems, they use external translation services. And I sometimes question the quality of those translations. Of course, you can throw more money at it and it can become better. But what we have in the open source world is very often a very short way from the people who use the system to the people who translate it. Often it's the same people, which means that you really have a community of translators who know the system. That means the quality can become much better, and it's much easier for people who see a mistake to go in and correct it in the translations. So really, it's much more efficient. I think it's lower cost and it's higher quality within open source.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. You're actually dealing with people that know your technology very, very well because they're the same people, and that makes the biggest difference. Why was the TYPO3 company created, and how does it complement the work of the TYPO3 Association? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's maybe an unusual story because the TYPO3 Association was created a number of years ago first. It's a member-based organization where the members take part and vote on major decisions and budgeting and those kind of things. But at one point, the members decided that the TYPO3 Association should found its own for-profit company, which we call the TYPO3 company. It's the association is in Switzerland and the company is in Germany. And the German company is called TYPO3 GmbH. That's sort of the LLC version of German companies. But anyway, this took what you often see as external companies by founders, for example, in other open source projects, and put it within the governance structure of the association itself. TYPO3 doesn't have an active founder in the project, so it is really the association that runs everything. And that company was set up to provide services to the web agencies that create websites for customers. It's not allowed to build websites for customers. It's only there to provide services like extended long-term support plans. They take care of our certifications. They take care of our partner program, event organization, stuff like that. And they're also a great force behind all of the sales enablement and marketing that is necessary for agencies to be able to sell TYPO3 well. And that means we have a company that's within our structure that can earn money on commercial products. And then that money goes back into core development in TYPO3. And that means we have an economy in the TYPO3 Association that's maybe better than what you would normally expect in a not-for-profit open source project. The association itself, without counting in the company, has a budget of €1 million every year.
How do you stay commercially sustainable? Can you share how TYPO3 aligns these open source goals with commercial sustainability?
Yeah, this isn't something you see very often in open source, maybe, but it's quite a common way of thinking about it. For example, you can see it with the National Geographic Society. That society in itself is not for profit, but it has subsidiaries that work for profit in order to find funds for the work of the society, and that's really a very nice way of working, where the commercial services are there to serve the non-profit work, to serve the community, rather than just being a money cow for individuals. It actually is there to create value for the people who use TYPO3 on a daily basis.
And how do you balance paid services with community contributions? I assume that you heavily rely on these community contributions, but I'd like to find out a little bit more about how that really works in practice.
So the community always comes first, and we're relying on community for a lot of important things within the TYPO3 ecosystem. But having a commercial entity with real money behind it makes it possible to have a foundation that the project can stand on. So if something important cannot be handled by our non-profit contributors, then there's always a body behind that with money that can be reallocated to solve those problems. So it's a security net in many ways, but it's also, of course, a way to take away maybe difficult or mundane tasks from people in the community and make contribution more fun.
Yeah, let's jump and as a last topic before we come to the bottom of the hour, so to speak. Let's talk a little bit about the future of multilingual content management. How do you see the role of CMS evolving in a world increasingly driven by AI and automation?
Good question. I think content still absolutely needs management. So content management will not die. It will just change into a different kind of content custodianship. Yes, you can ask an AI to build a website and it can do it for you without any involvement by you. But of course, websites need to be controlled and managed by people who have a longer term strategic look at why the website is there in the first place. And when AIs take over, I think that AIs to a large extent will take over for websites. Content management systems will be able to provide the structured content. Structured content is becoming really important now. They provide the content that the AIs can use and present to the end user. So yes, we're back to, it's not a website content management system. It is truly content management that is core also for TYPO3 going forward.
Yeah, maybe a final question on Agile, because that's really what the podcast is about. So we want to talk about that in parting. What does Agile localization mean in the context of content management today, in your opinion?
I think we need to be more agile when it comes to content and when it comes to localization, because we often see companies do localization once or do translation once. That is not a way that we can continue working. It's a bad way of investing your money. Your content, also the translated content, needs to be evolving, and that's where we need to work with structured content, because we can take out these small changes and work on improving the translations over time. We also need to get closer to the users, to the visitors, to the people who actually read the translated content, and make sure that they can participate in creating the best possible translations and the best possible content.
Awesome. Mathias Bolt Lesniak, we probably could go on for another hour or so, but unfortunately this is the end of this episode. Thank you so very much for enlightening us on open source initiatives and TYPO3's involvement in Agile localization. We wish you a wonderful day in Norway.
Thank you so much, and you too.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to learn more about how leading companies are managing their multilingual content efficiently, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in. For more resources on how to streamline your localization process, visit crowdin.com. See you next time.